Welcome, everyone. Oh my God, this is my favorite topic.
Now this is really your favorite.
Now this is really, well, they're all favorite, but do soulmates exist? And this just brings me back to my beginning days.
Back to the beginning.
Back when I was writing Let Love In. Even before I met you, getting into personal development and figuring out where is my true partner? Where's my soulmate? Is he out there? Does he exist? What does it mean to have a soulmate? The biggest question we always hear is, how do I know if this is a soulmate or not, a soulmate relationship? So we're going to talk about what is a soulmate, how do I know if I have a soulmate, if I'm in a soulmate relationship, and what does it feel like? What's the quality? And then the common myths about soulmates. And we're going to probably talk about a bunch of wonderful extensions about romantic love and
a few tributaries here and
there. Yes. So I want to start out with a poll that I saw on the Maris poll, and it said that 73% of Americans believe in soulmates. So 73%. So most people believe in it, and it's interesting. 74% were men and 71% women. So I thought it was so amazing that men believe in soulmates more than women. Not that much, but we always think that, I know for me, I was taught like they don't have emotions and they're not romantic, and it's the woman that is all the romantic. But you can just
I don't know where you got that idea.
People, the dating experts told me, like, man, you have to you're the one who's all romantic. They don't think like that. And
no, I mean, I've hung out with guys all my life, from kindergarten to
kindergarten
last year or this year. And guys are just as romantic as women, or maybe even more, like the poll suggests.
And so, Rob, what is a soulmate?
Yeah, from our perspective, the Jungian Eastern philosophy and including the neuroscience, we can see it at three different levels. It is an archetype, which means it's a universal pattern. That's why it plays out in every culture and every history that you've seen. And there are biological elements or biological ways that it plays out. There are psychological patterns to it. And then there are social and then spiritual patterns as well.
I know that many people try to figure out what is love. And so some people say, well, it's these hormones that are being triggered, or your brain is doing something that's triggering hormones in the body, and it's all about love is in the brain. And I would think that, yes, there's evidence that when you have those feelings, it does create responses that you can measure.
Absolutely.
But it doesn't mean that the brain is the cause of those feelings. It's just recording. It's the effect, right?
And it's unfortunate because people, let's say, especially in psychology, they've kind of painted themselves into a corner because they want to be bona fide science. And so the only way they can be a science is if they go by verifiable data, and the kind of the data that's at hand is neurological and neurophysiological. And so they tend to go with those explanations that if you want to understand love, you have to understand the brain and the hormones. That's simply like the biological pattern of a much larger archetype that, has been around forever.
Well, they're trying to rationalize love, which is the most irrational thing that we can do. It's not this thing that we can measure, have a step to get there. Like step one is, change your biology. Yeah, the formula. And so this kind of controlled, predictable, let's measure it, and then we know how to, create that. A lot of people say, I have a formula for you to meet your soulmate. Just follow my formula, put on a good profile, make sure your picture looks good. These are the things you say and don't say on a date. And this is, and then visualize, and that, your energy's going to go out there and you're going to find someone, and that's the formula. And we have to be careful. For me, it kind of got to the point where I was overly processing the process of love that I lost the romance of it, and it became more of a job. And I see this. We both worked with thousands of people. We started out our career doing a lot of the love coaching, and it's like it gets so like we lose the magic of it, and we it's almost like I have to work on myself to find love, and it becomes very heavy and demystified, and we don't want to demystify it.
Not at all. On the contrary, I think really understanding it in this broader context as an archetype, as something that connects us to nature, because if you notice, nature itself is organized in that context of duality. We have the sun and the moon, you have the day and night,
earth and the sky,
etc., etc. All these dualities are playing out the same patterns, and or we can also say that our human nature is playing out those larger patterns of male and female, lover and beloved, and it's an incredible way of understanding our connection to nature.
Also, the relationship with humanity and God and the divine. Yes. So that's a dual. Kind of a relationship.
The divine,
that we're here.
Spirit and matter, absolutely.
And so if you could define soulmate, you would say that it has 3 levels: biological, psychological, and spiritual. And then also it's really bringing 2 people together in some kind of powerful chemistry that's happening between 2 people. And so it can happen with people that are not conscious and unevolved, and it can happen with people that are evolved. And so how do you know if you met your soulmate? It depends on where you are in your individuation process. So if you're still kind of operating from ego, it's going to be one way. If you've individuated from your ego, you're more evolved. You evolved away from and worked through your shadow, aspects of your shadow, you're going to have a different experience in love.
Yeah, so if we go back to the Greeks, they were a little bit more savvy as to how to approach this question of what's going on in love, right? They had this different labels or different ways of identifying the different stages of love. So it's not just one thing, and we tend to oversimplify it in the West and think, oh, love should only look this way. But in reality, there's many different forms of that expression of love. So they had this term called ludus, which is a game-playing, kind of flirty, uncommitted attraction.
Why are you looking at me? But that when you first meet someone, you're in that, it's a stage that you're like texting each other and making jokes, and it's not like, oh my God, the most serious thing happened to me. You're more playful, and it's light and like tickling in a way, tickling each other's hearts.
Right. And in play, I think nature gives us an opportunity to refine the skills. So it's an important stage that we go through. You know, we call it puppy love or student love, where we're kind of playing at being in love. And that leads then to another deeper layer of love, which is eros. Eros is more the erotic, sexual attraction, where you start to really feel kind of more intensely, more passionate about this person. And of course it leads to sex and to kind of a deeper like bonding with a person.
Because you're really bonding in a beautiful way. So this is not one night stand. This is sexual, like I want to be your sexual partner for, a while, not just... I would say ludus can have a sexual component if it's just someone who's flitting, the bar trollers, looking for, to get lucky that night. That's more ludus and flirty and, kind of womanizer. And then there's the love, which is that like, oh, I want to get to know you. I want to feel what it's like to be inside of you. I want you to be inside of me, but in a deeper way for more than just tonight.
It is that urge to merge, and it's a very powerful force, of course. But again, if we start to identify love as merely that and say that's the way love should look, we're missing the whole point. It's an evolution. It's a process that's taking us to higher levels of commitment. So after that, they talk about philia, which is kind of a friendliness, right? You're not the partner is not only your sexual partner, but they're also your friend. You have warm feelings and
you want to be there for them. You want to help them with stuff that's outside of the sexual relationship and flirtatious. You're like, oh, you're having a problem at work. Let's talk about that. I want to be at your side, and you're building a partnership with someone more in a like you see them as I don't know, like you would have a friend in your life you'd show up for. You're there for them. Yeah, and it's not like only in the good times. You're there for them in the bad.
Yeah, a lot of couples say that. Yeah, this person is not only my sexual partner, they're also my best friend.
Yeah, I married my best friend today. A lot of people say that at their weddings. Yeah.
Which then leads to that pragma, which is the pragmatic kind of decision about, is this person really good marriage material? Can we make it a go in a lifelong relationship and create a family and all that good stuff? And that's a very different level of love, right? That you're getting to a point where it's not so much about the flirtiness and the erotic elements, although they're still there, hopefully, but that you're getting to a point where you're ready to commit and to create something new in your life together. And then the spiritual element is agape, which the Greeks talked about as this universal love, right? That almost like your love for each other spills over into society. That the relationship then gives something to society at large.
Kind of like what we have.
Yeah.
Like we're building something together. We train coaches. We help others together. And it's like a purpose that we share.
That's right. Or it can be through children as well, that you could, you bring up these great kids that go out there and do things in the world. Yeah. And
so when we talk about, like, some people you can only go to the level that you've evolved to be at. So some people will stay at that ludus level because they don't want that intimacy. Even flirtatious, they could have a fear of just connecting on that sexual level because that opens up so much more. And so it's like, I'd rather just flirt. When I could just know there's people I worked with when I was doing love coaching, and they were dating and they loved the flirtiness and they never wanted to meet the person.
Right.
They were like, oh, let's like flirt. And I have a boyfriend, but I haven't met him yet. We've been dating a year and it's like, safe. We're just flirty, but it's not getting to that sexual level. And then there's the people that have that, like, you have great sex and it's fun and playful, but there's not that like deeper, like, where is this going?
Right.
And then so there's that. And so, bringing it back to Jungian, it's really about what you bring into the relationship is reflecting your internal psyche. You're going to project your inside onto that person. And so one of the things that I love is what you teach, or you've talked about it, and I think you got it from Jung, is that psyche actually means soul. So when we talk about soulmate, we're talking about we're seeing ourselves in the other person. We're seeing our own psyche in that other person. So if you're unconscious, unevolved, you're going to project all the things that the greatness you don't think you have, and all the worst things that you don't think you have onto this other person. So it's going to be these relationships that are very high and intense, and they're the shiny lights, and then they completely crush you. It's those extremes, and it's because you're kind of looking for that person to you're seeing yourself in that person, but you don't realize it. You're seeing the unlived self in that person, which Jung called the shadow. So if you haven't done shadow work, it's a big projection. Now, it doesn't mean that that's not your soulmate and you can't grow in that relationship, but that level is the more you grow, the more that relationship can grow. It's always a reflection of where you're at. So I think a lot of times people find, this isn't not the right person for me, so I need to get someone else, and they keep trying to change the person versus changing themselves. Like he was the wrong guy, got to go to the next one, and then, or the wrong girl, I don't have that chemistry with that person, I got to keep searching, and they're looking outside for something they lack or something they don't know within themselves, and they end up kind of repeating patterns. And
so we go back to Jung's model, then he's talking about the Anima Animus, and we can just say soul here, because that's really what he means in a psychological sense, that you need to be in touch with your own soul in order to participate in a love relationship in a more mature way, because if you're projecting your soul onto the other person, that's part of it, because that gives you that experience of, oh my God, I met somebody who just is completely different than any other human being. But we know it's a projection, because if it was that person, everyone would love them. Everyone would see that beauty and that divinity in them. But it's our projection, right? We're seeing our potential, our divine essence in that other person.
So our inner concept is projected outward in that person, that unknown inner concept in that other person. So I always find that if you're not connected, well, let's talk about the Anima Animus. Jung said beneath the personal unconscious, we have a soulful self, which in most cases takes, if you're a woman, it takes a masculine form. If you're a man, it takes a feminine form, the Anima Animus. And that's that part that compels you to connect with the other person. And if you're not connected to that part of your soul inside, it's going to appear that that person out there has all this spiritual power, because you're not really seeing your own. You're not recognizing it within yourself. So that's why shadow work is so important, because the shadow kind of covers over that soul and that pure nature that we are, that pure potential, and all our patterns from our childhood and our life distort that other person. We're seeing not only them, we're seeing this divine, but then it's covered up with our own stuff. And if we don't do the filter, we're not going to see the person as they really are. We're not going to love the person for who they are. And that's why sometimes when you meet someone and you're not really attracted to them at first, and then you do some work and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, my soulmate's been next to me my whole time. I've had a couple people who read my book say that they read my book and then they didn't realize that their best friend, or people have taken our workshops, their best friend who's been there next to them for 10 years or 20 years, when they did the shadow work, all of a sudden they saw them in a different light. It's like, so the person didn't change, it's you changed. And so when Blake says when the doors of perception are cleansed, we see things as they truly are, infinite. And that's kind of when we really truly have that deep soulmate connection, we see infinity through them. We see our own divine through them.
So that projection is really the key to understanding love in a much deeper way, and understanding that it's the individual that has to connect with their soul in order to participate in a true love relationship. Otherwise, the projection, it starts to fade. It cannot last forever. In other words, keeping up that projection is impossible, because when you start to know the person, you see that, oh, they're just human beings like everybody else, and they have faults and foibles and picadillos, and then the person who is projecting onto the other person feels betrayed, because they say, you presented yourself as this divine,
you cheated me, you lied to me.
and now you're showing me your human side, and that's when they feel like, oh, I'm falling out of love, I don't love this person anymore, and they start to project onto other people, and on they go, right? You see these repetitive patterns playing out.
So it's that the more intimate you can go with yourself and really connect with your own soul, the more you'll able to recognize the soul in another and have that level of relationship, versus the ego level where you're just kind of defending your ego, and you're trying to, it's a power struggle, like they always say in relationships, and you're always a little bit defensive. You're not fully open-hearted. It's like an exchange, and kind of transactional relationship versus a real, truly like love. And, we were talking about this morning, and I said it's kind of like the soul in us is really the source of love, and that you really want to feel it so overflowing in you. Like you want to feel like you're overflowing, and you're looking for someone to share it with, because it's too much love just for this little body. I want to share this experience with another person. It takes two people to hold all this love, and that other person feels the same way. Can you imagine? That would be the ultimate, is that you're just both coming together to love each other, but not as much as taking. And I was thinking about it. It's kind of like plugging into your own source of power. And we've all been in the airport where our cell phone is running on empty, and we're trying to find that plug to charge up our phone. And that's kind of what people are doing with relationships. They're looking for that plug. Where do I plug my power source into to recharge myself? And if we can be our own source of power, then it's less of a burden you're putting on another person, and you really are they want to be with, you're naturally more attractive because you're overflowing. Yeah. And I think a lot of people, I know for me, when I was in my like Zen and happy moments and I felt really confident, I felt like men were trying to pull from me my power, and that's a lower level, unevolved way of seeing it. And so you have to be really open to share that love and not worry about that. Not worry about, I need to defend it and protect this love. There's just so much of it. It's so infinite that no one can take it from me. No one can squash it from me.
Yeah. And so this, let's say this process Jung simply called it individuation, where the individual is whole in themselves by connecting with their soul, their Anima Animus, through their inner work. Then that sharing takes place, right? That kind of free flow of giving and receiving can take place, because in projection, you're expecting the other person to make you happy, and that is very unfair to your partner. You're essentially dumping the responsibility of your happiness unto another human being. I mean, that's a formula for disaster, basically.
Like, you have to really truly be responsible for your own happiness, or because I would say no one can pour love into you like a hot soup on a cold day. That's what we want. We want someone to pour love, and there's this energy exchange, and they're giving us energy. No, we're in charge of our own, and what we see is almost like think of a bubble around us. We're seeing ourselves in the world, and the people are reflecting our inner world, and so we want to have a good relationship with ourselves. And that's the best thing we can do for others. And then, you don't have to worry about getting your heart broken, because the only reason we get our heart broken is because we plugged into someone and they disconnected the plug, and then we're sitting there with no power going, oh no, I don't have any power. Yeah. But if you have your own plug, I'm self-sustaining, self-powered, then you're not dependent on this other person to do that. And then the relationship is so much more, actually the ludus really comes into play, and the sex and the commitment, because it's much more, light and overflowing. And it's almost like money. People talk about, if you want to make money, you have to have an abundant mindset. If you want love, you have to have an abundant mindset of love. You have to be abundant within yourself. And one of the things you told me when we first met was that I was really happy when we met. You were like, I went on all these dates, and a lot of women were bitter and like complaining. And
I didn't go on a lot. I went on like on two.
And then I showed up, and I was like all smiles and excited about my life. And you were thinking, oh, this woman is, I don't have to kind of dig her out of a hole. Like, she's already out of the hole. Like, she's coming fully operational. And I think it's because I found my purpose.
Yeah.
When you find your purpose, and that's through your soul, that's really discovering your soul's purpose, why you're here, who you are. It's a different type of happiness. It's a different type of joy. And I know that I just for years I was looking for a man to give me that purpose. My purpose was to get married and have kids, but it was more of an ego purpose, like just to feel like I fit in or feel like I'm good enough, that I'm lovable, like trying to prove this ego, filling up this like ache my ego had. And then when I found hypnotherapy was the first thing I did out of school, it was really, I was just so happy. I was doing what I was meant to do. I was helping people. I was loving life. And it wasn't perfect, but I was definitely felt like I was finally on the right track and in line with...
You told me you were perfect.
Oh, I was perfect. Yes, that's right. I was perfect. No, but it like everything, I wasn't like a millionaire or anything like that, but and I was still like trying to build my business, but I was just so happy being in the game, being on the right track in my life. And just doing the shadow work cleared out a lot of that distortion of all the projections I put on men, to make me happy, to make me feel important, to acknowledge me, to approve of me, right? All that things that we want the other person to do. If you give that to yourself, then you don't need the other person to give it to you, and you're not always looking for them to reinforce it, right? It's like, oh, wait, what did you mean in that text? Or how come you didn't call me today?
Yeah, and just to be clear, we're not saying that you have to be, let's say, complete somehow before you get into a relationship or before you experience deep love. Mm-hmm. The relationship itself is a vehicle for that transformation.
Absolutely.
But you have to, again, bring your best game to it. In other words, you have to be willing to take responsibility for your own happiness and your own, like you say, you're doing your purpose already. You're not expecting this other person to give it to you.
One thing a real simple way, a lot of my clients will ask me, like, how do I know if I should pursue this or not? And I always find that if you're on a growth path, if you're yourself, always growing, always learning, wanting to be more spiritual, understanding yourself, you're going to want a partner who's also on that track, because eventually he may be at your level now, but you're going to outgrow him. You want someone to grow with you. And so if personal development is really important to you and understanding yourself, I'm not talking about therapy and healing and all that stuff. I'm talking about individuation, that you want to go to higher levels of consciousness. You want to expand your life. You want someone who also has that expansive, inquisitive motivation, because or else you're going to get bored eventually with someone who's not doing that, who's playing video games and, saying, you know what, I have my job and it's good enough. And you're like, I want to change the world. It's not going to measure up. And even if you're have this beautiful relationship, eventually your soul is going to need to grow, and you need someone who's going to complement that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so this question of, is there only one soulmate for me, right? And a lot of people ask us about this reincarnation or coming with this... a
preset person.
Yeah, kind of looking for your twin flame and those kind of things. And very beautiful ideas, of course, beautiful romantic ideas as well. Let's say that a lot of the past doesn't really matter, because everything you need to connect with your soul is right here, right now, in this moment. It's not about understanding the past or past lives. Everything is right here, right now, and there are many ways to connect with many people, but it is about making that mature choice. That when you're ready to go to the next level, you understand that I have to make a commitment. And that's what commitment means, that you're choosing to stay with one person and create a life instead of going back to that playful, flirty stage of no commitment.
Well, I think a lot of times people, that idea of soulmate, and there's only one person, and I find this one person. And it's so magical that it can turn into that playful, like, superstition and, look at the signs, and it's all magical and everything. But when we kind of get lost in that, and we don't really look at it from a conscious place. It's like we get lost in the magic. And also, I think a lot of times that another myth about soulmates is that people think that when you meet your soulmate, everything's perfect. You know, you just, if he was my soulmate, we wouldn't have any problems. We wouldn't get in fights. He's going to come in glowing, and he's going to understand me completely. And this whole idea that if it's not perfect, then it's not my soulmate. And that's what causes, I think, a lot of, like we said, it's a beautiful idea, but we don't want that idea to block out someone who's amazing for you. You know, this like, oh, but he doesn't, you know, have this or that. And so we want to make sure we understand that soulmate doesn't mean perfection. It feels like a different level, but it's not that everything's going to be smooth and your life is going to be easy now. It's like a lottery ticket. I always say, you're the love lottery. I won the love lottery. I'm done. I don't have to work on myself anymore. You know, a lot of people think that too. It's like, well, I met my soulmate. I don't have any more growth to do because I'm at the top. I met my soulmate, and that's it. And that's just the beginning. Mm-hmm. Another thing you said about the soul is that the soul is part of the unlimited universe. You know, it's really infinite. And so to think that it's only one person can fulfill that infinite aspect of the soul is kind of limiting in a way. And so we want to know that there's an infinite level of possibilities for us to connect with someone and have a soulmate relationship. Because I think a lot of times people, you know, we've had clients over the years that have had their soulmate came in, they had the perfect marriage, but he had cancer or passed away, or they got divorced, and then they think, well, I had my chance, I already had, or I screwed up. I had my soulmate in college, and then I wasn't ready, and then he went off and married someone else, and he's the only one for me, and I just blew it, you know. And so we want to, like, again, that soulmate idea, we don't want the ego to hijack it and sabotage your having a great relationship with someone else. Another thing too, I think this is one of the most important, is this idea of destiny and fate. That your soulmate is like there's this fate.
There's only one.
And you have to read your signs and your charts and all that stuff, and then this is when you're going to meet that person. It kind of, that there's like a fatedness to it that's out of your control. Yeah. What would you say about that?
Well, I would say if you haven't done that internal work, right, that connecting with your own soul, then you are destined in a way, because you're playing out your conditioning, your karma. And so if you believe that there's only one person and you miss your chance,
or your chance, someone told you that your window for soulmate is going to come up in 3 years from now, that's kind of like, there's no power in that.
Or if, for example, a lot of people get the message from their early childhood experiences that they're not worthy of love, right? That love is for other people. It's not for you. And this is totally, let's say, an emotional interpretation that children make sometimes because of the things that happen in the family. There's divorce, abandonment.
Or mother could be working all day and the nanny, and so I'm not deserving my mother's attention.
Yes. And it's unconscious. Yeah. I mean, that's the importance of that internal work, that it teaches you that, I'm not that history. I can decide for myself what I want to do with my life. So once a person understands these deeper principles of themselves, of the, let's say, the psyche, then they can decide, right? If they want to experience love, then they're not tied to destiny. They're free to really create the life that they want to create.
Like we talk about consciously directing our own destiny.
Yes.
And we can only do that after we have done the shadow work and we understand our the conditioning and the patterns that have made the decisions for us. Now we wake up and we have a choice now. We can go to the old pattern, we can do something else, and we're more free. So, getting those of you who might have, followed this idea of that you don't have a predetermined destiny, it is true for someone who hasn't done shadow work, but after you do shadow work, you're actually free to create your life. Jung always says that. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you'll think of it as fate. You'll think, well, this is just what it's meant to be. And, I get so many questions about us. People always ask, like, do you feel like it was meant to be? Do you feel like he was your soulmate? How did you know? And for me, I could share that when I met you, it just was a different feeling. And I wasn't trying to plug into you as much as I felt like I was plugging into something.
No comment on that.
No comment on that. He was trying to plug into me, actually. But anyway, that kind of, felt like there was this kind of connection that was beyond our persona, that there was something underneath. Like it was like our roots were connected in a way. It's like hard to describe, but I felt like he wasn't going anywhere. Like we were connected at the root versus connected with just the surface. And like a wave on an ocean that's going to drop in and disappear again. It was like, oh, it's deeper. I don't know what it is. Okay, we're getting into metaphors here.
Yeah, that's another podcast.
That's another podcast. But what was it like for you? Like when you met me?
Yeah, so at that time I was thinking about Jung's work in the context of the persona and the deeper psyche, right? So at the persona level, things are happening. You're meeting people, and I met you, and you kind of ask yourself, are we on the same track as persona, meaning as personalities who are working towards certain goals in society, right? The roles that we're playing in society. So if that matches up, then there's a chance to start that conversation about these deeper principles of philia and pragma, right? Of can we build a life together, and those kind of questions. And if that matches up, then you can start to make plans and connect at those deeper levels, like you were saying. And that deeper level, it is the soul, right? It is the soul level that connects us unconsciously. So when people are working towards their true self, then the
soul pushes you toward people that will
help exactly.
you.
You see the people that you need to see,
yeah,
because you recognize each other.
But it's interesting though, because on the surface, you and I had some differences.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, you said that
you want those differences.
Yeah, but you had mentioned that I never dated anyone like you before, like because I was, Jersey girl, like totally. You're so like established and academic, and I was silly, and but also womanly and divine as well. But like we were different. I was different, and you were very different than the men I dated before. So it was like, but there was something, like you said, unconsciously, I felt that intuitively that there was something more. It was like, I don't know, you could see through, like when you're more aware, you could see someone's soul through their soul. And you're not seeing with your eyes, you're seeing with your heart, but in a deeper way, not flirfiness, which I love the flirty part, but it's just like I said, it's like the roots are connected, or the roots are on a root level.
Yeah, well, that is this agape, right? It is the deeper soul, universal love that if you at least you're moving towards that, then the universe will naturally harmonize to bring those opportunities to meet people that are on similar paths. When you're only operating at the persona level, at the social level, and you're thinking, you have your list of the traits that you want in your partner. That's like a shopping list, essentially, right? You're looking,
and that's what it's like online now. It's like swipe left, swipe right. Oh, and you're looking at a snapshot of someone and what they look like, basically. Does this person seem physically appealing to me? Yes, no. In my age range? Nope, yes. And we're making such a superficial decision.
Yeah. And of course, you need to have that initial physical attraction.
Yeah.
It's the arrows, right? The playing out, where the Cupid shoots the arrow and pierces the heart, that you've been transformed. Something has happened, and you're in another world. You're transformed into or transported into that divine realm, in a sense. But then you need to understand the deeper principles so that you can make things happen at the soul level. And agape is that moving towards the divine.
And the more you do your own work, I feel like I always tell my clients, the single clients, that I want you to search with your soul for the person, not with your eyes and not with your ego. You're kind of, when you're going online, you just check in with yourself and just, search with your heart, not this practical, like, oh, well, he makes this much money. And then a lot of times their ego will make, like, if you're ego shopping for a partner, guess what? Like, a lot of my clients I worked with over the years didn't pick anyone too good looking because they were afraid of being rejected. So it's almost like they're already setting up to be like, almost like avoiding heartache, than like playing to not to lose versus playing to win.
Right.
And I think that's the and I don't know if I think men don't do it like women. Men are like, they'll go for the most beautiful girl. They won't have that, oh, I don't know if I can measure up to her. Or maybe not, but that's
well, again, you're thinking stereotypes.
Yeah.
The stereotypes don't really exist. I've never met that guy that everybody talks about. Everyone is a human being with powerful emotions, is this unconscious that drives you, and you don't even know, like most people don't even understand why they do the things they do.
Yeah. And also too, like when you're seeing someone, you're seeing that snapshot of them, but you're also seeing, when you're start dating someone, you're seeing a snapshot of who they are in that moment, in that stage. You're not looking at them for who they become and what their potential is. And so you're kind of like almost like writing them off before you even give them an opportunity.
Yeah.
To really, like, you don't know, like you're only seeing like such a small piece of the iceberg of a person.
Oh, absolutely. Most of it is going on unconsciously. That is why it's so important to work on yourself in this deeper way. If you're not able to cultivate that, then you're just working on the surface. And again, if you're on the surface, you're simply going to play out the patterns you were conditioned with in early childhood.
And you're going to say, my daddy, I got to look for my daddy, the father hunger we talked about in a previous podcast.
Yeah.
It's going to play out in relationships.
Yeah.
And so the idea of love is really, the more you can basically connect with your own soul. And like you say, that you can't find your soulmate unless you know your own soul. That's really, and when we talk about soul, is that we have to talk about who we are beyond our persona, who we are beyond our ego. What is that soulfulness? And that soulfulness is really with us all the time. And a really good way this is a real great tip. If you want to connect with your soul, connect with that pure awareness, that witness, that this part of you that's just watching your thoughts, that's aware of your beingness. That's your soul. And it doesn't have any past or future. It's pure potential. And that's connecting to that within yourself is going to be able to connect with the pure potential in others. And you're going to basically see through your heart and your soul versus seeing people through your ego. And of course, there's always projections and relationships and things to work out. But that's what helps you grow. Like, we're going to project our shadow in the relationship in the beginning a lot. Just because you do shadow work doesn't mean you're done. Like, you're still going to have those things. But it's the willingness to stick to it and recognize it and have a partner that's also understands that both of you are projecting. How do we work through this and grow together? That's really the key.
It is a spiritual journey at the end of the day, because if you think about it, think about the power that love brings to us. We have the power to create new life. We have the power to transform ourselves completely. I've seen people change, like, where there's no trace of the old person anymore once they fall in love and undergo that process of transformation. So it's a very powerful experience. Some of the spiritual traditions say that love is the most powerful thing in the universe. That, like, it is the power that creates and transforms, and we're channeling it through us when we create these relationships.
So it's like the partner can help us purify our mind so
Absolutely.
we can connect more with our soul.
Yes.
And it's a spiritual journey, not just a what do we call it? The Eros journey,
Right.
Which is also fun. And the cool thing is that having a spiritual partnership doesn't negate the need for flirtatiousness, to have fun, to sexual, romantic feelings, all those Valentines and, all those things that is fun about being in a relationship, just because it's spiritual and we have to be all like, oh, soulmate. We can be real and we can have best of both worlds, basically.
Yeah, and also the social piece that we have to work in the world, right? Like you were saying, connecting it to purpose. Purpose is an important aspect of love because it gives you the ability to support each other, to help each other, to work together to make society better.
So a man is asking, how can he connect to his soul? How can a man connect to his soul?
The beginning of the process begins with the shadow work, but after that, you get into reconnecting with your anima, and that's the soul in a man. It's an internal process. Jung talks about it as a night sea journey, but what he means is that we're going into the unconscious to kind of reclaim our connection with the divine. Because if you notice, in the beginning of life, we're so focused on building a persona, establishing ourselves as social beings and being accepted by society. There's nothing wrong with that, but that deeper work, you have to make that conscious choice to go inward, and that's how men connect with that.
Yeah, and if you're with a man that you feel like you want him to connect with his soul, the best thing you can do is connect with your own, because we only match up with people that are on our level. Someone's asking about law of attraction. We're not really talking about the law of attraction. That's more like it's kind of a different model. Jungian psychology is really that you're seeing yourself in the other person. So it's not about, like, law of attraction is more like there's a separate person out there that you're drawing in or attracting in. We think that Jungian psychology is about you're seeing yourself in everything you do. So it's your inner world is going to reflect what the situation is out there. So, the whole idea of you live in a small town, there's no single men left, that's what you're creating. So it's not about you changing your frequency or, to pull people in. It's almost like understanding what's the nature of who am I? If I'm an unlimited soul, I'm not limited by anything. I'm not limited by location or what town I'm in. And it's about connecting within and doing the work within to help you. And then I think one of the biggest questions is asking yourself, why do you want love? Why do you want it? And that answer is the work you need to do. Because for me, when I was looking for love, it was because I wanted to feel love. I wanted to be lovable or prove to myself that I was lovable or I was lonely. And those are, great motivators. But they're still from the ego. And so you want to get to that soulful desire, which is, I have so much to share and overflowing with love that there needs to be another person that I could share this with. And that's the shift.
Yeah, a lot of those principles that they talk about in the law of attraction are true, but they don't mention that you have to do your transformation first.
Yeah.
In other words, those things are not going to happen if you believe you're the ego, if you believe you're the persona, because you're in a limited state of mind. Once you do the transformation and you understand the true nature of the mind, true nature of reality, then you can create with your
that's
thoughts.
like the last part, the mindset of visualizing and creating. You have to go through the shadow work first, because for me, if I would have found someone from my ego, I would have married the wrong person. Someone that's not going to be aligned. I almost did. Actually, I got engaged to the wrong person because I was so wanting to be married and so didn't want to be alone anymore that it created this false perception, and I kind of convinced myself, oh, this is my soulmate, and I was just in delusion, and thank God it didn't work out. And so it's like we want to be clear on who we are, what we have to offer in love, what our soul is, like knowing who we are on a deep level, and then the right person it's impossible for the person not to show up, because you're being that. Do opposites attract, or do we have to choose someone similar to us? Well, you're talking about the persona, right? The opposite traits. Typically what happens is that if we're not conscious, we haven't done our shadow work, we do pick someone opposite because we're always looking at our shadow, which is the opposite of our persona. And so that's why it appears that opposites attract, but they're really you. You're seeing parts of yourself that you're not.
Yeah.
You're projecting, basically. So we want to, the bottom line is we have to recognize the projection. There's no one out there. Internally, they're going to reflect who we are and what we know about ourselves. There's a person out there, but our experience of them is going to be internal. Right?
Yeah.
It's kind of a weird situation. And it's not like they're a cardboard, they have no dynamics to it, but you're going to mix with and have the dynamic with someone that is reflective of what you believe they are.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Do you have anything else to share, Bob?
I do. I have a poem by...
We'll end with that.
Hafiz is from that Sufi tradition, very similar to Rumi. But he's a distinct or separate poet. And this one's called Love Echo. So it says, let us be like two falling stars in the day sky. Let no one know of our sublime beauty as we hold hands with God and are burned into a sacred existence that defies, that surpasses every description of ecstasy and love.
Beautiful.
Hafiz. And there we see the connection to that spiritual journey that love can be. Of course, if we misinterpret it as only the erotic element, only the romantic, passionate love, we're missing the richest part of it, which is the deeper journey of the soul.
Yes. Question is, she says she's already done her inner work. We never, ever, ever want to feel like we're done. And we don't want to think of, like we say inner work, but it's like, it's a process, and we're constantly, you don't want to stop. You want to keep growing. And it's not about fixing the past when we talk about inner work. It's about how do we become more of our true self. And so you never want to stop that growth. And if there's a limiting idea, the ego believes in limitation. So anytime there's a limitation or a belief about limitation, that's coming from ego, because the soul is infinite. So there's unlimited possibilities. And so I would invite you to look into that and why who you are. Ask yourself, who do I really am? How can I access more of that part of myself? Can you talk if your soulmate, with your soulmate, and want to be alone and not in a relationship, like they're going through a midlife crisis?
Yeah, you could definitely be in a relationship and feel lonely if there is not that true connection there.
She says they want to be alone. Oh, they want to be alone. Oh, the other person doesn't want to be alone, yeah. The other person wants to be alone and not be with you.
Yeah, and sometimes you do have to give people that space, because maybe it is that they need to re-examine that soul within them, and the only way they can do it is to seek that solitude.
And then, ask yourself if that's what you want. That's where I think we get trapped, because we think if that person is the one, then I have to kind of settle because that's the one, and whatever they're going through, because they're the one, I have to like put up with what they're doing. And so it's asking, is this what I really want in my life? Does this feel the relationship I want to have? And always whatever they're going through is something in you is tracking with that. So you have to ask yourself, what is that pulling away? How am I responding to that? And that's something for you to uncover and open up. And then you can be clear on what the next step is for you. But I think a lot of times people, they fall in love and they think this is my soulmate. And I'm not saying you, but I'm just saying as an example. And then they feel like they tolerate a lot that they shouldn't, but they think, but he's my soulmate, so I have to put up with this stuff. And so we want to be clear that we can keep boundaries, and this soulmate idea, don't let it cloud what you really want in life and relationships, and stop your growth. Because if you're not growing with that person, then it's probably not really, and you want to grow. The dissatisfaction is your soul wanting to grow, and it wants to have more. So yeah.
I mean, that's one thing about us human beings, is that we're continuously evolving. It's not, it's not like we're static. It's a false idea that we are this persona or this personality. Even at the personality level, we're always changing, evolving, learning new things, having new ideas, new desires. And so it's, for couples, it's so important to really communicate at a much deeper level and talk about where do we want to go, right? Not only as social beings, but as spiritual beings. What joint venture can we share in this process?
And if someone truly wants to grow out, if they outgrown their relationship, they want to be alone, the best thing you can do is let them be on their path, and then you have to decide what's right for you, and they're always reflecting a part of you. So they're not acting in isolation. What does this say about me? What's in my shadow that is creating this dynamic? Where am I pulling away? Where I want to be alone? How do I respond to that? And then, or how do I tolerate and be too patient with it? You have to see how you respond to that. And then also, how has this pattern shown up in my life in other places? I always find that it's great to look at where other places this dynamic shows up. A lot of times people say, oh wait, this shows up at work too, or this shows up with money, or with my parents. And so you start to recognize that there's a pattern there, that it's not just about that person, but it's about something inside of you. And that gives you the power back, or else you're waiting for that person to decide if they want to be with you or not. You have to take control of your own destiny and your own growth, and then trust in that, because your soul wants you to have the infinite possibility, the greatest love in the world. And so that's what would be.
Yeah.
What if self-work doesn't lead to a soulmate, that people shy away as you step further into your own power? I think maybe you're the people that are shying away are meant to shy away, and you have to be open. There is a gap sometimes when we individuate. And, I want to distinguish the difference between just kind of healing work, kind of working on your ego and your past patterns, from individuation, which is transcending the ego. That process gives, when we start stepping away from our ego and identifying with our true self, there is kind of a gap. We start to lose people in our life. We lose our desire to be with our old friends. And sometimes there's a little space where we feel alone, but then we reconnect with people that are more on where we're going versus where we've been. And so that sometimes happens. So I would trust in that. Where do you want to go? Instead of clinging, and notice that these people falling away because you've outgrown them. And it's better than just hanging out with the same old people and staying in your same old patterns, and it feels uncomfortable.
Yeah. If your heart is open, someone will be there to fill that space.
Yeah.
It's just like a natural law of the universe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And really it's trusting that your soul wants you to be happy. Your soul wants you to have that infinite expression. It always wants to grow. Oh, it's always looking for abundance. And so if that is what's happened, if you know that that's the intention of your deepest self, then anything that's not leading to that is probably from the ego.
Yeah.
And the more you know yourself, the more you'll be on seeing things as they truly are. So great topic today. I know we usually do whole courses on relationships, so trying to pack it all in 1 hour. But great topics of the Greek levels of love and shadow work. And of course, make sure you subscribe to our channel here on the bottom to get our lives every week. Next week, we're going to take a break. It's 4th of July weekend here in the U.S. We're going to be out of town, so we're not doing a podcast live next week. But we are going to be back on July 9th for our wonderful new series on yoga and spiritual practices in the, I don't want to say modern world because you think that's 50s, but in the contemporary world of how do we take these old teachings from thousands of years ago, and how do we apply it in our everyday life, the paths to spiritual growth. And so we're going to explore the yogas, the 4 yogas, and so that should be fun. And of course, visit us on our Facebook group, Jungian Life Coaching with Creative Mind, and we'll see you in 2 weeks for our new series.
Yeah. Thanks for the great questions and the participation. We appreciate that. And see you next time.
Take care.
Stay well.
Bye-bye.